You are listening to the Adapt Performance podcast, where we aim to make elite level strength and conditioning accessible to everybody. I'm your host, Jordan Webster, and let's get into the episode. If I had to start my strength and conditioning training again as a beginner, here is what I'd change. And I say this as somebody that is on the other side of 16 years worth of training experience, as well as like 13, 14 years of coaching experience, right? So this is going to be a little bit of a timeline of my training history and some of the things that I've learned along the way and some of the things I've learned from, going to different countries to shadow other people coaching and stuff like that. So hopefully there is stuff here that is useful to you. My first gym experience was going to the gym with my Uncle Dave. So he was a bodybuilder. He was jacked to the tits. He was a broad guy. So he took me to a YMCA pumping iron gym, and we did probably an hour and 15 minutes of chest and buys, classic. Which is probably where my bro heritage comes from. It's probably why I still love it. I still just lifting weights. Like, it's sick. Getting a pump, there is no better feeling. So yeah, I did that with Dave. He absolutely obliterated me. And I would have been like genuinely maybe 13, 14. So maybe not the smartest idea. We then got a Mackey's on the way home, and then we went back to his, and he made us a protein shake in a blender, put loads of whey protein powder in, with loads of scoops of ice cream, peanut butter and banana. Like, it was a thick shake. So I had to chew through that for a while. And that was really cool. Like, I look back on that memory super fondly, my first experience in the gym. And I definitely think, when I think about some of my mentality towards the gym and what kind of motivates me for stuff, I think so much of it probably is down to that, to be honest. Like, I think that's definitely rubbed off on me in terms of, you've just got to enjoy the process. You've got to enjoy training. You've got to enjoy getting after it. And just being around other people lifting weights is like one of my favorite things to do. Just sharing the same barbell as somebody and just having chats in between sets. And it's still one of my favorite pastimes, doing it with the boys, like best mates and stuff. It's so cool. Moving on from that then, okay, other than you've just got to be passionate about it and just enjoy the little things, is my first proper experiences of strength and conditioning were off the back of me being a young mixed martial artist. So when I was 14, got into MMA at a local gym. So it'd just be everything from striking to grappling to wrestling, the whole works. And did that for a couple of years, and then, started to identify that, maybe I needed to improve some physicality in some way, shape or form. And we had two guys that came in that were CrossFit coaches, but did some strength and conditioning as well. And they led a class for us. And it was a bit of jumping, it was some compound lifting, and it would be like a Metcon style thing, so some conditioning at the end. And, taught us how to lift good and that type of thing. And to be honest, this was the same time as me and one of my best mates had just got into lifting weights for a little bit of like aesthetic purposes, right? We were trying to look better, feel more confident. And we were very much in the bro split era of our life, which was back by chest tries, legs never, right? That was the plan. So to be honest, looking back on that time, I definitely did not respect the fact that I had two really good S&C coaches that were teaching us good stuff that would actually improve our performance as an MMA guy, because I had my eyes set on something else, and I look back and I'm like, you wasted that opportunity. And I really did, because we just weren't bothered. Like, it wasn't aligned with what we were trying to do. Like, we were just in a different headspace for it. And that's a really powerful lesson, because sometimes you can have access to the best information in the world and somebody that's really going to guide you to the top, and you can squander that. You can not be asked in any way, shape or form. And I find that now as well, like, maybe I'm egotistical in saying this, but I put out good content. I feel like I'm a good coach. I help people on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. But there are still some people that I have interactions with where I'm like, you would really benefit from coaching. And they're like, yeah, I'm good doing my own thing. And I'm like, oh, bro, this would just change your career for the better. Especially when I hear their training, I'm thinking, you need to change that because that's bad. But I'm like, that was me. We are human beings sometimes, and sometimes we're so stubborn and we won't change. And yeah, but literally that was my first kind of introduction to it. And the interesting part about that experience is I do kind of come back to that, is over the next couple of years, I got into the gym a little bit more, started lifting more weights. I was still doing MMA. One of my coaches at MMA said to me, Judd, I think you need to get stronger, man. Like, I think this would really help your performance. And I took that as a dead literal. And okay, so I'm like, I need to get stronger. Who are the strongest people in the world? Powerlifters. Great. Let me go down that route. So I looked at some powerlifting programs and I ended up following Smolov Jr. So Smolov Jr. I think it's Russian. It's a Russian program, which is basically 3 weeks where you pick one lift. So I did it on squat. You can do it on squat and bench at the same time. I think they recommend not doing it on deadlift, but essentially it's 4 days a week where I think you put in your percentages of what your one rep max is. So you would squat on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. Okay. And it is high volume and it is high intensity and it is brutal. It is so tough. So I'm talking like the set and rep ranges were 7 sets of 5 on day 1, 8 sets of 4 on day 2. What's the next one? 10 sets of 3 on day 3, and then another one. Like, it's a lot of reps, a lot of sets. But the thing is, you do get stronger. Like by the time I finished it, so it was a 3-week cycle, you then deload, you then go again. I put 10 kilo on my 1 rep max. And I was already decently strong at that time, just because I did get into training legs eventually. I did kind of turn it around. And I went from, I think it was 150 to 160 squat. And I was probably like 18 at the point. So I was fucking buzzing with that. However, what I did get is a fuck ton of injuries as a result of this little, okay, I'm going to go from training legs once a week to boom, let's do 4 times a week, right? I got injured to shit. My knees felt like they were going to explode for about 4 months. My back probably never been as good since. Like, that was a huge spike in loading. And I've definitely had periods in my life where I have also done very similar things, either intentionally or not intentionally, whether I've changed program and gone mad with volume out of nowhere, or as a byproduct of just things going wrong in training, I've ended up like with big spikes. And you get injured. So I'm so on this now for the most part. Like, I try and control training load as much as I can, because I really believe that this is the thing that really fucks people over, is going from 4 sessions to 7 sessions a week, going from 0 sessions to 4 sessions. Like, that huge spike just will fry you and it'll obliterate you. So that is kind of my other lesson there, is thinking, you know what, just because somebody says you need to get stronger, maybe take a little bit more care in terms of your build up and be aware of training load management. I then started to get into strength and conditioning a little bit more when I got a job in my first gym, which was cool, because I'd sit at the desk and in between people, training, I'd obviously go and help them out and we'd chit chat and those types of things, which was really cool because they were usually lads that were a little bit younger than me. So I was a little bit more of an authority at that time. And I was probably, like 19, something like that. And I would be reading. I'd be all over Elite FTS. I'd be all over T Nation. I'd be all over Poliquin's website before he passed away. And I'd just be reading. I'd be refreshing those pages just to get a new article on something cool. And then I'd try it on myself and I'd try it with the boys. And it was really nice because I felt like at that point I was looked up to in a positive way, which is cool because I obviously like that. You want to be somebody that is useful to people and can help them get their goal. But I also found that I just had a little bit of a knack for kind of relaying some of that information to people in a simplistic way, and then ultimately putting it into a practical sense of like, cool, I've read this thing. This is how we're going to do it. This is how I want to program this over the next couple of months. And I got so much experience writing programs. And I think the thing is, I was always trialing it on myself first. And I think that's one of the things that really annoys me about strength and conditioning nowadays is you've got people that will read a study and be like, cool, I'm going to give it to my athlete and then we'll see. And it's like, there's no practical element to it there. Like for me, when I was growing up through this, it was like, try it first, figure it out, do it for a few months, and then you'll know, okay, that kind of worked or that didn't work. And look, you will fuck around with athletes programs sometimes and you'll be curious and you'll chop and change. I get that. But there comes like a point where I feel like you should know how it feels first to be able to do that. That's my thoughts. Anyway, but that was really cool. And ultimately what happened as a result is I ended up messaging one of the guys who was taking the MMA S&C session, the CrossFit style stuff. I messaged him because I saw him put something up on, I think it was Facebook at the time. I was like, mate, I'd love to get some training in with you because I saw him doing some Olympic weightlifting. So then I reach out to him as somebody that had now got into S&C a little bit more. And I then realized, fucking hell, that guy that was showing us stuff we weren't bothered about when we were younger, he's the guy. Like, he's doing amazing stuff. I want to go learn from him. So I went and trained with him, trained with him like 3 times a week in the morning. And it was essentially the same programming as what it was back then. But now I was really bought in because I knew a little bit more and I really appreciated it. I had, this golden brain in front of me. So I went and picked his brains for a while. And it was a really cool experience where, he was one of the pivotal things that kind of made me think, you know what, I want to do strength and conditioning as a career. And I want to go down the route of working with athletes. And again, so my takeaway point from this was like, you can change your mind. Like, I think sometimes looking back on your history, you'll realize, fuck, I made a mistake there, but you can rectify that stuff sometimes. That was really cool. So Rich, he's one of my boys. I'm super happy that I met him for a second time and kind of reignite that relationship, because he definitely got me started on this journey, and I think there's definitely been some key people that have been that way for me as well. So off the back of that, then I then went down a route of trialing most different training programs throughout this. So I'd stopped MMA by this point. I was doing powerlifting training. I'd done some pure bodybuilding by this point. I'd also got heavily into strongman for about 3 years, and had some competitions in that. And that's one of those, like, going back to, I'm not sure if you guys saw my post the other day speaking about like carries, weighted carries, and how I feel like they're overrated for athletes. That's not because I've read it in a book that I think they're overrated. It's because I spent 3 years trying to farmers carry 150 kilo in each hand. I never got there because that's heavy. And realizing how much it fucked me up, and I would not be able to go and do my sport properly off the back of that, because it was just super heavy and you pick up injuries as a result and you don't actually get any better at your sport. Therefore, what are we doing it for? So yeah, anyway, so I went down the route of just trialing a lot of different training modalities, did some CrossFit, did a little bit more endurance-y based stuff. And it was really cool. Like, I love training. If it's not apparent already, like, training is one of my favorite things to do, and I will do it till the day I die. But trialing different things is super important, because I think it gives you a lens of what's good, what's not. I definitely believe that success leaves clues, and you can look at different training modalities and learn from them. It doesn't mean you need to take every single bit of what they do as gospel, because sometimes people get success in spite of what they do rather than because of what they do. So you need to be aware of those outliers, and sometimes there are genetic contributions and sometimes there are other things that go along. But I definitely believe in looking at who are the best at strength. Okay, well, what are they doing? Let's see what we can learn. Who are the best at endurance? Okay, they get a lot of like steady state, low intensity work. They get the mileage in. Cool, let's learn from that. But I think with it taught me about coming back to like first principles of what are we actually trying to change. And this is really when I started going to university, and because I wanted to understand that a little bit more. I wanted to understand, well, why are bodybuilders big? Like, what's the underpinning stuff that makes muscles grow? So I went into got my degree in sports science, went on to do a master's in sports science as well. But throughout this time, it's a degree in research in a lot of ways, practically applied research, even though probably not as practical as I would like. You're then looking at these things like, okay, well, what training will elicit this adaptation and get this result? And because you're around it so much, you get a little bit, bought into let's optimize. And I definitely did that. I would focus so much on making a 1% improvement to a thing that I'd forget about the 20% of everything else. And I'd just kind of end up spinning my wheels a lot of the time, where I feel like I was stepping over £20 notes to pick up a 5 pence piece. And I think that's what a lot of people do when they first start optimizing stuff, is they just make bad decisions because they get like focused on this new shiny thing in the future. And honestly, a big part of like good training is the basic stuff done consistently with high effort and good intent. Like, that is really like the gold. But once you tick those boxes and you're really consistent with it, and that's the thing, that's where people really fall down, is when people get obsessed with optimizing and the new thing, what that affects is their consistency. That's the thing. I'm not against grabbing 1%, but I'm against people chasing the new thing and stopping what they were doing previously because they never actually make progress. It's like one step forward, two steps back, one step forward, two steps back. You're losing momentum, and momentum's huge. It's such a powerful metaphor, such a concept that I fucking love, right? Is let's just get a little bit better over time. Let's add, let's add, let's add. That's what we're about. Anyway, so yeah, I definitely went down this route of being a little bit more of an optimizer in many ways. And I think you've basically you've got like a continuum, right? It's a little bit of a pendulum. I think on one side, you've got like the optimizer that is trying to get the very most out of the least. Okay, how can I get a 20% return? How can I get an extra little bit out of this? Not 20%. How can I get 1% extra out of this? And that's cool. How can I get the most from the least? That is like optimization. Whereas on the other side of things, you've kind of got your maximizers, whereas like, how can I get the most? I don't care if I have to work harder, but how can I get the most? And you basically got like those two, they're not quite opposites, they're both kind of gearing in the same direction, but two different approaches. It's like a fork in the road. I'd gone from being somebody that loved training and would definitely like train myself into injury and overtraining and those types of things, very maximizer. How can I get the most amount of progress to actually, how can I get the most from the least? How can I not do a lot, but get a decent return? The maximizer, in my opinion, will probably always win, providing that you survive, and I think that's a good mentality to get into because I think too many people speak about the optimization stuff. Again, get distracted and don't actually achieve. So that's something that I kind of picked up is optimizing is good. We got to make sure that you do not like turn your back on the most important things, which is just making good amounts of progress consistently. And off the back of like university, then I did a lot of internships. So I worked at the university that I was studying at, so Sheffield Hallam University, where you'd collect 12-hour days of coaching. You'd go back to back. You'd have 6 sessions back to back of the same program. So you were like a conveyor belt of shit jokes and the same coaching points and stuff. But it gets you good at the skill of coaching, the nitty gritty and details, and interacting with a variety of people. Like I learned a lot about different populations, working with disability, youth, old, a group of 20 people with no equipment, one-on-one stuff. Like, I think that was really cool. And I think that really kind of changed my perspective, actually, in terms of, look, you've got many, many different reasons that people come into a gym for strength and conditioning. You've got to be aware of those because not everybody is you. And as much as like, I think my training philosophy is amazing, it's not the best. It's not the way. It's not the only way you want to do strength and conditioning. People do it for different reasons. And you've got to be aware of that. And you've got to kind of meet people where they're at because not everyone wants to get bigger biceps. Some people want to do it for jumping. Some people want to get better at their long distance running. And people are doing things for different things. So you need to be aware of that. If you want to be a good coach, I think you can't be too fixed in your ways. So yeah, through these internships, like I went to America and I did a 6-week internship at Pepperdine, which is in Malibu, California. So the D1 basketball university, and it was sick. It was really cool. Like 6 weeks, I went out there and it was so hard. Like, and I know you're probably thinking, oh, Malibu, bless you. Like I paid $3,000 to work probably 80 hours a week for 6 weeks straight. Like I had the most intense heel pain I have ever had in my life. That is because I was stood up for 16 hours a day, either spotting people, coaching people, demoing, or doing the stupid tasks that I was getting hazed, or what do you call it now? Hazed is like the American version where they just try and fuck people up for no reason. Initiation. It's basically like an initiation. When like your first job in like a chippy or a builder's yard, they'll send you to go get a long stand. When I worked in a chippy, the boss sent me to go get some ice making fluid from the local shop. So I'd go to the shop and I'd be like, oh, have you got any ice making fluid? My boss sent me over. And they'd be like, oh, we ran out of ice making fluid, mate. But if you go down to a local Asda, and I basically was getting ping ponged around these shops on my first day at the chippy. I go back to Trina, my boss at the chippy, and she was like, did you get any ice making fluid? I was like, they all said they'd run out. She was like, you realize I was talking about water? I was like, fuck off. So she'd fully done me and everyone was in on it. Anyway, so they used to do that to us in America. they basically made us weigh all the weights. Like they had kettlebells all the way from like 4 kilo up to like 62, maybe 60 something. It goes in like fours and that. But they wouldn't let us move the scale close to where the kettlebell rack is. So I'm sure they were just messing with us just for the sake of keeping us busy. And I understand that. It's a rite of passage. But anyway, I had the most intense heel pain I've ever had in my life. It was a really tough internship. And one of my key takeaways from it, like as much as seeing elite athletes in this sport that have probably gone on to be in the NBA and those types of things, is culture was massive there. The coaches spent a lot of time ingraining good culture. The athletes were also held responsible for ingraining good culture. Like if you had a weak link, and I don't mean weak link as in genuinely just like not as strong. I mean somebody that was a little bit of a negative Nancy, a Debbie Downer, a bad apple, they would get eradicated so quickly. Like people would not tolerate having negativity around them when their goals would get to the league, to be the best in the world. If you were a little dickhead and you're causing mischief, the coaches would get rid of you first, to be honest. But that'd be brought attention. People would make the coaches aware of it because, like, I don't want that guy around. So culture is massive, and I think that's been really important for me. Is you've got to be around good people. You've got to be around people that you gel with, an environment that you really enjoy that is actually conducive to you improving your performance. And even away from improving performance, you've just got to be around people that like are actually encouraging you to grow and be the best version of yourself. And I know that sounds like such a cringe thing, and I understand, but I genuinely believe it. Like you can't be around negative people. It'll kill you. Like it'll slowly drown you in terms of what you want to achieve long term. And as a result, like I've probably trained in like 7 different gyms in Sheffield, just trying to find the one that I really enjoy, that has the right mix of people for me, that has a good training culture, a good training environment, has the equipment that you want. So don't be scared of moving around a little bit. Don't be scared of making new friends, of getting new training partners, and going to different gyms to explore where you feel like you can smash your training the best. Like definitely do that, because I think that really matters. So I learned that. I think that was super important. That's definitely something I've taken with me. And I kind of had that in me a little bit before, particularly around like negative people around you. You just can't have it. It can't be tolerated. Like that will slowly, slowly kill you. I also learned really interestingly, like the coaches at Pepperdine in America were workaholics in a lot of ways. Like they were always there. Like I said, I was doing 80 hours as an intern. They were probably doing a few more than me because some of them used to get to the gym before. In terms of what that looks like, mate, like Monday morning, I would get picked up at 4 a.m. Okay. We'd then drive 20 minutes to the university. We would coach, we would lift, we would coach, we would coach, we would coach, we would lift again. I was getting 3 sessions in a day. Like, and honestly, I was probably in the best shape of my life, but I was definitely like overreaching for sure. So they were workaholics. And look, I understand for them, it was their purpose was to be the best strength and conditioning coaches at expense of everything else. Like they would die hard, and as a result, elements of their life were probably crumbling a little bit. And look, you could probably pinpoint somebody in your life, whether it is your uncle, your dad, your mum, a best friend, I don't know, somebody who is like way, way workaholic, and you think, you know what, you might be pushing it a little bit too far to a point where you're um, probably not living life to the way that I would prefer. And you can kind of see that their relationships might start to struggle, or even they're just ruining themselves, right? Mental health wise and stressed out. And I think that for me was a big eye opener, because before going there, I knew I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach, but I hadn't really experienced that degree of workaholic, like serious issues. And I'd left Pepperdine changed, but in a really positive way, because my heels were fucked first and foremost. I don't even know why my heel hurt so much. I think it was like, I don't know if it's the start of a stress fracture or like some serious patellar tendinopathy, but fuck me, is the worst. So yeah, I was permanently changed. My heels were bollocks. But secondly, is I knew I didn't want that degree of work. Like I didn't want it to be so overbearing to a point where, one of the coaches just wouldn't ever see his wife, or he wouldn't go for food with friends because he had to write a program for volleyball, women's volleyball second team. And it's like, we're here to serve others as part of purpose. I do believe that. I think that's something we all kind of need, is that bigger thing. But fuck me, I felt like he was missing out on life. So as a result, you know what? I left Pepperdine thinking, your training goals are really important too. They should be. I think you should be leaning into that. The chances are, if you're listening to this type of podcast, you probably are in somewhat of the same headspace as me. Like, training is one of the most important things in my life. I fucking love it. But I don't know if it is the most important thing in my life anymore, because I think then it starts to really kind of impact on different things. So I learned that was powerful for me. Then, okay, moving forward, I'm probably, I'm 14 years on from when I first started coaching now. I feel like I have seen a lot. I have heard a lot. I think one of my biggest lessons, actually, and this is, there is deeper physiology that like underpins this as like a training modality from an adaptation standpoint. But I think people do way too much in terms of volume, okay, within a single session, but equally over a week. I think what people do is they end up just creating a lot of fatigue. I think you're doing a lot of fatigue and you're just doing busy work. And that busy work is not actually achieving the outcome, because you're not hitting a threshold to trigger the adaptation that you want. So you're just doing a lot of stuff. You're trying to like, what's the word? You're trying to mop up the ocean. You're just kind of moving shit around, doing stuff. It's like, it's not the most effective way. There's a saying I really like, is if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. And I think if more people approach their programming and their training in that way, they would get a lot better. And essentially what I mean is, instead of just working hard, which is definitely like a skill and you definitely want to work hard in the right direction, making sure that you are achieving the things that you want to achieve. And, my advice to you would be, if you are an athlete in whatever sport, is go on Google, type in needs analysis, okay, of whatever your sport is. A needs analysis, for those of you that are not aware, is basically what we do as strength and conditioning coaches when we start working with a sport, a new sport that we aren't aware of. And it basically gives you like a research rundown of, okay, these are the movement patterns that we see in our sport. These are the energy systems that predominate in our sport. These are the injuries. These are the types of high-speed meters we hit if we are a running-based athlete. This, right? It gives you a full kind of up-to-date rundown of what your sport is. Most of that will make sense. Like, for the majority of it, you'll be like, oh yeah, but my sport involves running. Nice one. Cheers, Jord. But there will be some gold in there where you're like, you know what? I felt that intuitively, but it's nice to have somebody back up that this is an important factor of my sport, important factor in my sport. So do a needs analysis, right? Literally go down it and just see, because I think it'll challenge your beliefs in terms of, okay, well, if aerobic conditioning is important in my sport, is that reflected in my training at the moment? Bring up your training. Is it reflected? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. So you can then start to unpick it a little bit and really kind of get to the bottom of, if these are the vital parts of me improving as an athlete, my training needs to reflect that. And I think just kind of questioning people with that is a really important thing. So do a needs analysis. And I think that will kind of showcase a few things for you that you might not be aware of. The second thing, and I speak about this all the time, and I'm a broken record with it. So if you've heard this from me before, then I'm telling you again, I'm not apologizing. Write down your program. You just going into the gym and doing a bit of this and a bit of that is the fastest way to do fuck all. Like, honestly, it's not that you're wasting your time. You will make progress and stuff, but you're already going through the hard work of training and the effort. Write down your program, because what that'll do is, one, it will force you to think about what is actually in your session, and just putting your thoughts onto a piece of paper or a Word document will force you to confront sometimes how silly your decisions are being. I don't say that condescendingly. I make silly decisions all the time. But when you're in your mind so often of just trying to remember this and trying to remember that and just putting two exercises together because of this, you don't really see how daft it can be. So write it down. That'll force you to look at the program. You can then see probably obvious signs of, I'm not really doing that movement pattern. I'm not doing that movement pattern. As a loose rule of thumb, right? I want most of my athletes to squat, to hinge, to press horizontally, press vertically, pull horizontally, pull vertically, right? I want them to rotate a little bit, okay, through the trunk. I want them to flex their spine both forward, backward, and laterally, okay? Then I would want them to do some key injury work where they are attacking. This goes back to needs analysis of thinking about, well, what are the key injury areas in my sport? You will know if you do your sport, you probably have sore elbows because of this, right? There will be some that's like so no-brainer that you just crack on, but make sure it's reflected. Like if you get bicep tendonitis as part of doing X sport, maybe you need to do some bicep strengthening work to make sure that your tendons are appropriately strong so you don't get that, you don't lose training time. So there'll be some really obvious ones. But there will also be things like the big catastrophic injuries that you don't see very often, but probably needs a little bit of work on just to make sure it does not like pull you apart long term. So I definitely do that. Do your needs analysis, write down your program. I think more people, again, 14 years on from just seeing people training, I think more people should do a bit more conditioning. I don't think people do enough conditioning, to be honest. I think over the last 2 years, since being a little bit more involved in jiu-jitsu, that's been the biggest thing I've changed. I do more of it. I do more fitness work in general. I do some super high intensity stuff, which is really improving my muscles' ability to take and use that oxygen. And I also do a little bit more steadier state stuff just to improve my ability to get my heart and lungs pumping blood and oxygen to the working muscles. So you've got like a pump, and then you've got the vessels that are going to take and use that. So I definitely think more people should do that. Look, and it can be a long hike, where you get your heart rate up a little bit. It can be a bike, bike to work. It can just be a long walk sometimes. Like, I don't think there is the most amount of stimulus in that for people that are already decently fit. However, moving is always going to be a good thing. Cool. Right. So if I had to recap what my kind of takeaways from today were, again, like I don't write a script for this, if you can't tell, right? But I have some things that I think are really important. So look, sometimes people will give you good information. You just might not be ready to hear it yet. That's my experience from my first kind of S&C coach. I then went back to him a few years later when I learned a little bit more. I think trialing different training modalities is a really good thing to do. You will find some really good things about them, but you'll also find some really shit things about them. I'm not convinced doing powerlifting, bodybuilding, strongman, and all those things as its own entity is going to improve you as an athlete, but you can take little lessons from each one and apply them to a good athletic training program. And I think you'd probably see a lot of benefits from it. I definitely went too far down the route of like overtraining and just train. I've learned that that's probably not the best way for your body or actually to get adaptations. And look, me telling you this might not even change your mind at all, because sometimes you need to go through some shit yourself to actually like learn the lesson. And I think that's probably another lesson. Somebody telling you don't do this, you'll get hurt. That's not enough for some people. It's not enough for me. You tell me something, I'm like, yeah, I've got to figure it out myself though. So I'm going to go and do it. And I'll be pissed off that I didn't listen. But I think that's human beings, right? I think sometimes we need to learn the lesson the hard way in order for it to settle. It just is what it is. Like, I won't stress it too much. Write down your program, actually train hard, but train in an appropriate way. I think if training is important to you, make sure it's important to you, but I wouldn't give up your whole life for it. Like, don't say no to meals out with friends, unless you're like seriously like cutting and those things. But even then, you could probably just convince them to go to a different restaurant so you can calorie track. I think control your environment a lot. Like, make sure you are not around negative Nancy's too much. Sappuccinos, I think they will bore the life out of you. I think that's terrible. Get around a gym environment that you really enjoy being around. Like, make training and going to the gym a fun place to be, because you'll really ingrain just that training's a lifelong thing. Cool. Right. There we go. Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, let me know. If you didn't, also let me know. But let me know why. I am going to go get a coffee. I'm going to go to the shop and get a meal deal. And then I'm going to come back and do some programming for the guys that I coach. Cool. Guys, do me a favor. If you don't follow our YouTube, go to our YouTube and subscribe to it. Cheers. Speak soon. Okay, that is the end of today's episode, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, please do let us know and then share it with somebody who may find this episode interesting. Okay, see you next time. Cheers.